Hey guys, and welcome to Scotty Ze and the Tribes United. This is a very interesting episode that you're about to listen to. I was a guest on call it an interview, it was a group session with a spiritual community called Connecting Consciousness. And in the show notes, I'll link to their work. It is a global movement, a global spiritual community, and they invited me on as a guest to share about my experience living here in the Ringing Cedars, the Anastasia eco-village that I do in Russia, and my journey through my 20-something years now of my spiritual path to end up living here in this eco-village and doing the work I'm doing here with you, with the Tribes United. So I got to just speak about me, right? I got to share my story. This is my Genesis story, let's say. This is me sharing where I came from 20-something years ago, when I got my, criminal convictions at 19, all the way through to my Kundalini awakening, my Walkabout, my television show, all the way to, working with thought leaders and then being here in Russia today. A little sneak peek. It's a fascinating story. If you're just sort of new to learning about me, this would be an opportunity to really dive deep with who is Scotty Ze and where did this vision of the Tribes United come from. So have fun, dive in, and let's do it. Enjoy.
All I was going to say, Scotty, is you're part of the Ringing Cedars movement. You live roughly 4 hours east of Moscow. You're living off-grid, where everyone grows their own food. You're living a free and carefree life, or that's certainly how it seems to be to me. I know that you're building things up as you go along, and that you just want to share your wisdom with the world. I think one of your mottos is, we're all in this together. You see yourself as something of a Pied Piper in this respect. And you're also about to start, if you haven't started already, a podcast.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. Val, thank you so much for that beautiful guided meditation. It's been a while since I've had a guided visualization. I can see where everyone keeps coming back every week or whatever you guys do. You'd be coming just for the connection around the fire. I think that's really beautiful. It's something we need more of. So I'm from Australia originally. You can probably tell from the accent. I started at 19 years old. I was pretty normal kid, high school and this, that, and the other. But I went a little bit off the rails around 17, 18 years old. Can be quite a bit of a tough time for a lot of people, and I was one of them. My dad and I, unfortunately, didn't have a very good relationship. And although I was excelling in every area of life, I was absolutely miserable. And after high school finished, I went to university. I was studying biotechnology and microbiology, science, not because I was that interested in it, but because my family and school and everyone was saying, you're either going to be a lawyer or you're going to be a doctor. I was the smart one of our family. My dad was a truck driver. My mum worked in kitchens, and all of a sudden I'm, like top of the school and this, that, and the other. And I was just getting pushed to be a certain way. And I didn't know how I wanted to be. I was 17. I don't know what you guys were like at 17. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what life was about. And so I was sort of playing this role of what everyone wanted me to do. And I was doing uni, and I hated it. I hated my life. I had no relationship, as I said, with my dad. And so I went off the rails and I started hanging out with the wrong people, and I started breaking into cars and getting into fist fights and, just being a young hooligan. And I got arrested and I got caught. And it was a very dramatic moment of getting caught. There was a car chase, and this guy, we were trying to break into his car and steal his stereo, and he didn't want us to do that. And he chased us around and, in the car, and police came, and it was very dramatic. And over the next 15 months, I went through the court judicial system until I finally got 16 non-recorded convictions. Thankfully non-recorded. I was a good kid. The judge said, I can see you're a good kid. I started doing community service. The lawyer told me to do that to show that, I was going to give back and whatever. So I got a slap on the wrist effectively. But the guy who had physically caught me and my friend 15 months earlier, he didn't like that we had quote unquote got off. We hadn't gone to jail or whatever. And he decided to take the law onto his own hands and tried to kill me. So very dangerous situation to be in. We went to the police and we got my dad and I We went and got a restraining order against this man. He had a car audio shop, and my girlfriend at the time of 2 years, her sister's boyfriend, anyway, stay with us, sister's boyfriend, he was the manager of a car audio shop. There was a chain of car audio shops, and this guy thought that I was, put two and two together, that I was a goon, his words, trying to put his car audio shop out of business. And he didn't obviously want that, and he took it into his own hands that he was going to end my life. We got the police restraining order put on him. The next morning, I'm on my way to work. I'd quit university and I was working now for Vodafone. Within 4 months, I was a manager of a Vodafone store, making lots of money, still miserable, but doing what society told me was success, making money, bought a sports car and this, that, and the other. And I was getting ready to go to work, and this guy called me. And he said, police just visited me, you'll be dead by this afternoon, and then hung up. Broke the restraining order straight away. I told my dad, and I said, Dad, this guy's just threatened to kill me. What do I do? My dad said, you got two choices. One, you can go into police custody, and they'll hide you out and you can fight this in the courts, or get on a plane right now and fly out of here. Back to where I grew up. We'd moved to the big city when I was 16. That was part of the going off the rails as well. And I said, what do I do, Dad? And he said, pack a bag. And I literally packed a backpack. My dad hid me under a blanket in the back of the car, drove me out of the carport, drove me to the airport where my dad worked at the airport. And you can imagine in 2001, literally taps me on, drives me to the plane, walks me onto the plane, says hello to the captain. Like, my dad worked there. He drove the truck that put food on and off, did the catering. Put me on the plane. I flew back to a small town called Cairns in the far north of Australia. And my whole life just changed on that day. It was the 25th of January 2001. My auntie and uncle picked me up. I said, can I borrow the car? They said, yeah. I drove up to this mountain, this lookout that looks over Cairns, a place called Mount Whitfield. Anyone ever been to Cairns? It's where the Great Barrier Reef is. You been there? Nice. Cool. Good spot, eh? So there's a lovely mountain that now has like a paved path and stuff, but 20-something years ago, it was just a dirt track. I hiked up the top of that and I'm looking over Cairns, and I just broke down for 2 hours. I just cried, and I was like, what the F just happened to my life? 2 years ago, I'm leaving high school, like giving the valedictorian speech, and, I was school captain and all of this, and, top marks and blah, blah, blah. And 2 years later, I've got 16 criminal convictions. Nobody wants to invite me to any parties because I keep getting in arguments and fights with people. Me and my dad have no relationship whatsoever. My life is a mess. I'm so unhappy. What happened to my life? And I started to reverse engineer it, and I was like, well, number one is violence. I have an assault conviction from this guy. Again, no recorded, but he tried to, physically caught us and bash my friend and tried to bash me, and it wasn't going to happen. So I fought back. I got an assault conviction. I got in a fight with my dad, physical fist fight that ended our relationship. That's how he and I fell out of it. And I just realized violence is just not how I want to live my life. I'd got a black belt in karate. I was state champion 6 times for full contact karate. I liked to fight. And I realized I had to change my ways. It was not going to help me. So I made a vow. I lifted my hands up and I said, I vow I will never lift my hands in violence ever again. And I never have. In 22 years now, I've never been in a fight again. I've never acted in violence. And I'm very proud of that. That's been a big transformation for me as a young, angry man. And I think that's something a lot of men have to go through. I'm strong. I can fight, but I choose not to. And I think that's really important. And that's been a big part of my life. And the second thing is reverse engineering this 2 years of destruction. I realized that I was doing what everyone else wanted me to do. I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. And I said, well, what do I want to do? Right? Like, I was being the good boy. I was doing, I was making money. I went to university. I was, being everything that this society told me was going to be successful. And I was absolutely miserable. And I said, well, what do I want? I said, I want to be happy. That's it. I just want to be happy. I'm 19. You can imagine me at the top of this mountain. I'm like, well, what does happiness mean? I'm like, oh, I have no idea. What's happiness? I know it's not this. What's happiness? And I said, I don't know. But what if I do all of the things that I've ever wanted to do? Maybe that will make me happy. And I said, well, what do I want to do? And I'm a 19-year-old testosterone-filled guy, I'm like, I want to travel the world. I want to jump out of airplanes. I want to go rafting and kayaking and scuba diving. I want to do all of these adventures, have all of this fun. And maybe that'll make me happy. And I said, done. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do that. And so I trekked down from the mountain with my 2 vows. I'll never do what anyone else wants me to do again. I'll never lift my hands in violence again. I went to sleep, probably midnight, woke up the next morning, walked down to my auntie and uncle, Bruce and Kathy. And I exclaimed, they're sitting there, the guys, never forget this moment. I exclaimed to them, like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to this and that. And my uncle's super sarcastic. He's like, you just want to have breakfast first? I was like, yeah, okay, Bruce, thanks. I'll have breakfast first. And I told him what I was going to do. And my uncle Bruce said, well, I went scuba diving a few months ago. I think I've got the business card. Why don't you start there? And I was like, okay, cool. And 2 weeks later, I found myself on the back of a scuba dive boat on the Great Barrier Reef. And I just fell in love with it. And I started talking to him and I said, how do I get a job doing this? And so long story short, for the next 2 years, I become a dual certified dive instructor. I've done over 2,000 scuba dives. I've taken hundreds and hundreds of people scuba diving for the first time. And it absolutely changed my life, just being there with all of these happy people on holidays. And that sparked just a journey in me to just have fun. And I just traveled the world from there. At the same time, I went to my first personal development program and my first spiritual teacher, you would call him, a guy named Michael DeMacchio Rowland. He passed away a couple of years ago, and he taught me how to meditate. So at 20 years old, I'd turned 20 by this stage, 20 years old, I started meditating. And, it wasn't very popular like it is today, 22 years ago. And I really committed to it. I'm the kind of guy, I don't do things in halves, right? You probably noticed that from my stories. And he said, meditate every day and you'll be happy. And I was like, done, I'm in, sign me up. And so I started meditating every morning. I would set an alarm and I would meditate for 20 minutes. I sat on the ground and super uncomfortable in my little meditation pose with my little cushion. And I started meditating every day. He introduced me to yoga and I read the book Autobiography of a Yogi. It is incredible. It is on my bookshelf here. It is one of about 20 books that I brought with me from Australia to Russia. Same book I read 22 years ago, changed my life. Because I read that book and everything that Paramahansa Yogananda was talking about, I knew was real. I knew it when he was talking about it. I'm like, this is reality. And it was the first spiritual book I'd ever read. I didn't come from a spiritual family at all. It was all new to me, but I knew it was true. And so I just started going down this path of meditation. I moved from the fighting arts, like karate was my background, into yoga. And I started doing yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong. And I started going down those routes. And after 2 years of scuba diving, I moved to Japan. That was the first place I moved to overseas. I lived there for the next 18 months where I learnt Japanese. My family had grown up hosting Japanese students, so it was already pretty close to my heart. And I got fluent in Japanese. I had a business, not business, I say business now, but it was a job. I had a job in Japanese. I had a relationship in Japanese. After that, I moved back to Australia and become a sea kayaking guide and a whitewater rafting guide for the next 2.5 years, guiding Japanese tourists. So I was speaking Japanese in Australia for the next 2.5 years. And I was really deeply into Zen Buddhism. So I spent a lot of time living on the river in the rainforest, just meditating every day. I read all of the Zen scriptures and spirituality became my life. At the same time, just before I moved to Japan, I went to a clairvoyant. I don't know if anyone's ever had a reading before, but at 21 years old, it was 18 months after the traumatic experience with having to flee to save my life. I came back to Brisbane to see my mum and my dad. I hadn't seen him in 18 months. And my mum, after I started going in the spiritual path, I started telling my mum about it. And my mum started getting into the spiritual path and meditating as well. And she did her Reiki, which then I later did when I was in Japan. And mum started getting into it. And I flew back to Brisbane. She's like, you've got to go and meet this lady, Patricia Prophet. She is a clairvoyant. And I'm like, what the bloody hell is a clairvoyant? And she's like, well, she'll spend it. You pay her $50. She'll spend an hour and she'll read cards for you and tell you your future. And I was like, cool, I'm going to do that. So mum lent me a car and I drove up to the Sunshine Coast, which is about an hour and a half north of Brisbane. So it's east coast, for those east coast of Australia, beautiful spots in Queensland. Yeah. So I borrowed Mom's car, drove up to this lady, Patricia. I paid her $50. I did the reading. It lasted for 7 hours, this lady. 7 hours. She downloads on me, like made me cups of tea, fed me dinner, keep downloading. We're in the kitchen, keep downloading. She just like opened Pandora's box in terms of understanding. You know, I'm a 21-year-old kid. Yeah, I started meditating. Yeah, I'm getting into yoga, but like spirituality, spirit, 1111, angels, you know, how the reality works, the afterlife, you know, just spiritual downloads, 7 hours. And I was just a sponge asking questions. You know, she started talking about 1111. I started crying. I've been seeing 1111 since I was probably 11 years old. Every night I'd wake up at 1111. Well, not every night, but it felt like it. And I didn't even know it was 1111. And I kept seeing this. But when I was a kid, I called it, it was my favorite number. It was ... which was the dot for the PM. Remember the old school alarm clocks? You know, the little flash, and that was next to the bed. There was the dot for the PM, the dot for the alarm clock, because that to tell you the alarm clock was on, 11 : which I called ... because I didn't know what a colon was, you know, ... 11. So it's ... 11 ... 11. And I was, oh, ... 11, that's awesome. That's my number. And then she starts telling me about 1111 being activation codes. And I started crying. I'm like, what the hell is going on? 7 hours later, it's midnight or whatever the time was, or late. And I was like, I've got to go home. So I started driving back to my mum's place. Crazy story. I run out of petrol on the highway, put off this little off-ramp off the highway, call my mum at midnight. I'm like, I'm so sorry, Mum. I've run out of petrol. I wasn't even focused on it. I was like in daydream. She said, it's okay. Call the roadside assist. You guys have that in the UK, I'm sure. They'll bring you some petrol. So I called the number on the dash, on the screen. She had a sticker. Called them and they said, yeah, no worries. You'll need $10. I opened my wallet. There's like one $10 note. And they were like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. Got $10. Said, we'll be there in 45 minutes. I was like, all right, no dramas. So I go out and I sat by the side of the road, and there's this big field in front of me. I sat cross-legged like I had been doing every morning meditating. And I was just like, what the hell just happened there? 7 hours. It was incredible. And I felt this tingle up the base of my spine. I never felt it before. And this like tingle came up through my heart. And then all of a sudden, my head is locked back at like where the atlas bone is. And it was just like, I couldn't move. I was just for like, I guess it was the next 45 minutes, because I came out of it when the flashing lights of the RACQ, the roadside assist, came. But it was just white light and bliss for 45 minutes. Whatever that clairvoyant had activated in me, I understand it now to be like a Kundalini awakening or something. It was like that energy moving through my spine. But effectively for me, it was 45 minutes of just white light and bliss. That was all it was. There was no breath. I wasn't breathing. It was like my throat was open and air was just like moving in and out of my lungs. And I came down from that. Again, when the flashing lights come, I sort of just come back and I like floated up. Like I stood up, it was like floating. I floated over to this, in Australia, we have a saying like rough as guts. I don't know if you guys say that in England, but it was like this rough as guts roadside assist fella in his fluoro. He's like, g'day mate, how you going? Well, really nice to meet you. And instantly, like I could see that he changed when he met me. He was super lovely, super nice. Oh, lovely to meet you. Shakes my hand as he leaves. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. I get back into the car and I start driving. And I come into the small suburb where my mum lives. And I pull up to this set of lights. I'll never forget it. And this car pulls up next to me. And I felt this guy in the car next to me. I was like, whoa. And I could feel his whole energy field. And then all of a sudden I can feel everybody asleep in all of the houses up this whole street. And I was like, whoa. I ended up driving around for the next 2 hours just feeling everything. Like I could feel people asleep. I could feel spirits in this tree. I'm 21. I had no idea about any of this stuff. And I'm just like, wow, fully awakened. I went home, finally, I was like, I better go to bed. Went home, woke up the next day, and that heightened state had gone, like it had come down, but I was never the same again. So 19, had to flee. Life flashed before my eyes. What the hell am I doing? I'm going to find a better way. 18 months later, 21, this whatever Kundalini awakening or whatever you want to call it, but this like feeling, and that just took me down the rabbit hole. So I went back scuba diving, moved to Japan, I deep into spirituality, Zen Buddhism, and all of the stuff. And my life has just sort of been this like spiritual journey since then, that all I've ever wanted is to experience what I experienced on the side of the road. But a couple of years later, I moved to Hawaii, and I had my walkabout, my rite of passage. And this will get to where I am today in the eco village, but I think it's important to share sort of the journey of what got me here. I got called intuitively in Aboriginal culture. Like, I grew up in far north Queensland in Australia, in the rainforest with the Indigenous of Australia. I'm 7th generation Australian, but I'm English. Obviously, you can probably see that looking at me, right? I'm English, like most of you guys here, you know? But my family moved to Australia on the Second Fleet in 1790. My family's been over 200 years in Australia. And there's something about, you know how we all have crystals? You know, because the crystals have a vibration, they have a resonance. Land has a resonance. Where I live here, this has a vibration, this has a resonance. So part of my experience, you know, my DNA, my blood is 200 years as a white man on the land of the Indigenous of Australia. And so I'm very connected to that Indigenous culture. I grew up, you know, my school was, you know, Indigenous. They would come down from the north. We had a boarding school, a lot of Indigenous there. So I'm very connected to that culture. When I was 23, I got intuitively guided on my walkabout. So the Aborigines have a rite of passage called Walkabout, where traditionally the young men would leave the tribe and they would follow the song lines of their ancestors. If you're interested in that, you can do a bit more research on that. I won't spend time explaining it, but effectively intuitively guided into nature to find our purpose so that we can return to the tribe and declare, this is who I am and this is what I bring. This is the value I bring to the tribe. I know my place in tribe now. And they would be welcomed back in, and then it was they would be supported to live that role within the tribe. So I was intuitively guided when I was 23 in Hawaii, and I did a circumnavigation of the Big Island of Hawaii. So Hawaii, for the Big Island of Hawaii, is the largest mountain on the planet. Bigger than Everest, but it's all underwater in the Pacific Ocean. It's an active volcano. Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea, and Kilauea. There's 3 sort of peaks of the volcano. But then there's 7 islands. And King Kamehameha, he united the 7 islands of the Hawaiian chain and named them after his island, Hawaii, right? We call it the Big Island, but the actual name it is Hawaii, and the whole chain is Hawaii. So I circumnavigated this active volcano, the largest mountain in the world, for 31 days on a $100 Walmart bike for 3 weeks until it broke down. And then I ended up walking for 7 days down the King's Trail of the Kona Coast, if you ever went to the Big Island. So, you know, the Hilo Coast is all like cliff and lava. And then the Kona Coast, the west side, is all like white and black sand beaches, and it's, you know, more flat. So I started at Hilo and I went all the way around. During that, 3 weeks into it, I was in a sacred site, the Hawaiian sacred site. They call it a heiau. And I was meditating, as I was every day. And I had a similar experience to when I was 21, but this time it wasn't white light and bliss. I got taken on a bit of like a journey where I got shown, imagine like a natural amphitheater, like a valley. And there was all of these little lights. And these little lights started to like, you know, like little candle flames. And these little lights started to like activate, like light turning on, light turning on, light turning on, until like all of these little lights in this amphitheater became this white light. And then I was back into the white light and bliss, right? But in that, I came out of that and it was different. It wasn't an individualized white light. It was a white light of all of these other lights, these other white lights merging into one light. The next day I wake up and I actually had locked my bike at the heiau at a tree because, anyway, another story. And I started walking down the King's Trail. There's this massive trail that King Kamehameha used to walk between the villages, and it's like a 2-meter wide stone path. And I started walking on it, and the whole thing was overgrown. Like halfway into the day, I'm like pushing through, and, you know, I didn't know what to do. I ran out of water. I couldn't go back because I didn't know, you know, it'd been 4 hours of walking. I didn't know where the end was, started freaking out, and I was covered in spiders. you can imagine, little spiders, big spiders. At first, it was freaking out. I'm Australian. We got spiders, but there was just spiders everywhere. I just got used to having spiders on me. Like, I just had so many spiders. I finally, at sunset, I came through the King's Trail and it opened out onto this clearing. There was a house. I was like, Jesus, thank God I've got no water. So I went up and knocked onto this lady's house. She's Australian. I was like, you're kidding me. What are you doing here? She's like, what are you doing here? I was like, I just told her my story. She's like, come in. She fed me. She gave me some water and whatever. And she was like a spiritual lady. And I told her about this experience with the spiders. And she said, the spider is your amakua, your spirit animal. In Hawaiian, they call it amakua. Spider is your spirit animal. I was like, a spirit animal? Okay, this is new. What's a spirit animal? And she said, well, that's, you you sort of embody that energy. And what is a spider? I was like, I don't know. She said, what does a spider do? A spider creates a web. A spider connects that web, right? Maybe you're here to, connect the web. And I was like, whoa, I had this experience last night where it was all of these little lights. And then over the next few years, I had to go through this process of understanding my place, my purpose. My walkabout was designed to show me my purpose in this world. And it came to it in this, that was 2004. So 3 years later in 2007, I was living in America, in California. I got invited there to host a television show. I started making videos on, do you guys remember MySpace? I had a MySpace account and I started making videos when I was living in Japan. And I was telling people about, what I was learning and spirituality and awakening and all this sort of stuff back in 2005. Crazy, way back then on MySpace account. And this guy I met, he lived in California, was hosting a TV show, Action Sports TV, and he said, in 2007, he said, why don't you come to America? I can get you on TV. And I was like, cool. So I moved to America and I started hosting this Action Sports TV show, pitching a concept that I had called Walkabout, taking at-risk teenagers into nature to help them find their purpose and their place using adventure sports. Because by that stage, I was doing a lot of adventure sports. And I had my Walkabout. So anyway, I hosted my first gathering there called the Global Conscious Collective. And it was a monthly event. We would watch a movie, a conscious film, and then we would have a discussion. It sounds like connecting consciousness. You guys are doing the same thing, and maybe that's why I'm now meeting this tribe, is, I just like, we have to bring the people together. We have to come together. That's all we have to do. And then over the years, I realized, that was a long time ago, I realized that this is a collective enlightenment, that what I want, that white light and bliss, I just want to live bliss. I want to live love in my life. And you guys seem to all be about that based on the meditation. I want to live love. I am love. We are love. But what I was reading in Autobiography of a Yogi was these yogis going to the cave and meditating until they became enlightened, right? And I tried to do that. And I realized that this is not an individual journey anymore. This is a collective journey. It's a collective enlightenment. And those white lights in that amphitheater that all united to bring about the one light are all of us. And it's all of us that we have our individual light within us, that light of the divine that has to be awakened. And if you guys have ever done this before, where you get two candles and you bring the candle flames together, what happens to the candle flame? It gets bigger, right? It gets bigger. So if you bring enough candle flames together, the light gets so big and bright that light will encompass the room. And that's what our job here is to do now. So in 2015, I changed the name to the Tribes United, and I was working in the thought leader space. So by 2007 in California, I got introduced to the whole thought leader space where, Mark Victor Hansen, Tony Robbins, Jay Shetty, Robin Sharma, you name your thought leader. These guys that are out there speaking on stage and inspiring people, and like what today would be called the coaching industry, back then was the thought leader space. And I got introduced to that and I was like, wow, this is cool. I don't even need the TV Hollywood nonsense. Facebook just started, 2007, started getting more mainstream. I think it started 2007 to the general public. And then I was like, cool. So I went in that direction and I started moving into the thought leader space, realizing I don't need TV, but actually I have social media and we can help people in that way. And so 2015, I created this idea that what if we just bring the leaders together? You guys have got a tribe already. Collecting consciousness as a tribe. and then there's all these other tribes that are coming together, but we're all disconnected. What if we all just came together? It's like throwing a good party. If you want to throw a good party, I'm going to say, hey, Glenn, invite 10 of your friends. Val, call 10 of the girls, let's go. Claire, you bring 10 of yours, I'll bring 10 of mine. Everyone bring 10 friends. Man, we got the best party on the planet. So what if we just do that? What if all of the tribes just came together, dissolve the ego, and that's pretty much the only thing that's keeping us apart, right? This ego, separation, dissolve the ego, come together, work together, support each other. A rising tide raises all ships. As each of those candle flames grow bigger, that raises the vibration of all of us. And then we can, selfishly, I can have what I want and you can all have what you want, love, bliss. But collectively, we all get to live this enlightenment. And so my journey has been, for the last 20 years, just this journey of being love. Like, I want to be love. I want to be enlightened. Beyond the, I lived in Ubud, Bali. Ubud, Bali is it's like the yoga center of the planet. It's very like new age spiritual bypassing, and it's not how I roll. I've been there, I played that game. To me, spirituality is so normal. I think you guys is the same, judging by, the leadership that I'm seeing in Glenn and Val, at least the center of the circle here. It's so normal that it's not woo-woo. Like, this is the new normal. We are the new normal, right? I'm a very traditionally masculine guy. I like building stuff. I like raising animals. I live on a farm. I like getting in the mud, getting dirty. I take care of my wife and kids. Like, this is not, I don't need the tattoo to tell me that I belong to the spiritual tribe. Glenn probably knows what I'm talking about Ubud. But this is just so normal for me that I just want to meet people, connect with people, and share this with people, that this is how we get to live now. We get to love each other. We get to be a blessing on each other. For me, it's about disconnecting from the system. And that leads us to where we are today. When COVID started, so for the last it's longer than that, 2008. What are we now? Jesus, that's 15 years. For the last 15 years, my profession has been working with thought leaders, coaches, healers, particularly around marketing and sales, to get their message out to the world. I realize the tribe's united, right? If I can help them to help more people and we can all come together, not everyone wants to listen to me. Probably some of you guys are like, man, just get to the point. That's okay. And others are like, man, keep talking. That's great. It's just how it is. We're not all going to resonate with everybody. So I just want to help people to help more people. And then if enough people help more people, then everyone gets a lot of help and we can all raise up. But in that journey, when COVID started in 2020, I had been teaching online, and I had my program back then. It was called The Brand You, teaching people to be the brand, and your wisdom is what will change the world. And as soon as COVID hit, I'm like, right, the Satanists have began. I don't know how far you guys are going down the rabbit hole about the cabal and the people that are, the archons, or whatever you want to call the people that control the dark energies of the world, right? They're pushing for their final phase of control. This is good. We need this. That means we're moving into the later stages of the enlightenment process. Time to bring the people together. So at that moment, I closed my business. This is March 2020. I closed my business and I started a movement called permacare. Have you guys heard of permaculture? Permanent agriculture comes from Australia originally, now global phenomenon. This is about living in harmony with your local environment. And it's beyond just growing food. It's about like living in harmony, but growing food is obviously, it's permanent agriculture. So I created a movement called permacare. And permacare was about permanent agriculture, but also permanent care of people and planet. So it's very much bringing in that people aspect where we care for each other and we nurture each other and we help each other. So I invested money. I put a 20-year lease on 10 acres of land right in the heart of the Gold Coast. Put your hand up if you've been to the Gold Coast, Glenn. Hey, some of you guys have been to the Gold Coast. That's awesome. Beautiful spot, right? Super like spiritual center of Australia and conscious entrepreneur. So I got this 10 acres of land right in the heart of the Gold Coast. It was a flood zone, which hurt me a little bit when it's flood season. Horse paddock. The developers couldn't develop it. And I put up a 15 by 7 meter wedding marquee. Those big white ones with the roll up plastic sides. And I just started running empowerment events. in the center of the Gold Coast. And I had a big tribe around me. We were having hundreds of people coming. We set up a big community gardens. I started bringing different speakers. Obviously, Australia, we had a lot of lockdown. You guys probably saw what was going on in Australia. I know the UK copped it as well, but Canada, Australia, New Zealand was the worst in the world. And Australia was the border between New South Wales and Queensland, the two states, was like 30 minutes from where we were. They closed the border, hard closure. It was full on. Like you had to have a pass to cross it. And yeah, we just started running these events and bringing people together. But unfortunately, we attracted the attention of a lot of the mainstream. In Australia, we call them wankers. Do you call them wankers? I don't know. They're just wankers. And they smashed me. They started calling us the veggie cult because we were all about growing food and buying local and, building community. They started calling me the veggie cult leader. They had like a smear campaign against me on social media, like full on in these local community groups. So it felt like for every one supporter we had 10 enemies. There's a lot of brainwashed people in Australia. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but there's a lot of like mainstream, line up for the jab, just follow, like everyone's got the Ukraine flag on their profiles now and stuff. It's like, wake up, you wankers. And they smashed me. They absolutely hammered me. The local council came down very hard on me. I was, because I don't know, it's probably the same, but if somebody complains to the council has to investigate. So all these local wankers started complaining to the council and the council had to investigate. I had 6 different council officials working with me. Everything from how I was growing food to the driveway to moving soil, because it was a floodplain. I couldn't like move soil on a floodplain because it raises the height and all this bullshit. Everything, my signage, like you name it, they were trying to smash me about it. I got a fine. I got a $1,500 fine. Then they threatened me with a $3 million corporate fine because the lease was under a corporate entity. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. The police one day, I'm sitting there feeding the chickens. You can imagine we're on like two main roads, but a really main arterial road. Again, the developer couldn't develop it. So it was a beautiful location. And I'm sitting there feeding my chickens in the middle of this field. The car drives on, like a detective car, like a unmarked car drives on. I thought it was one of my community. Like literally drives up. 2 police get out of the car. I'm feeding the chickens and they're like, oh, we had reports that you were hosting an anti-vax, anti-mask rally here on the weekend. And I'm like, hang on a second, mate. There's no law against me having people around to talk about what you're doing. There's no law against me having to wear a mask or having to like get a vaccine. Why are you here? It's, there's a lot of this anti-vax thing going around and it's really, very dangerous for the community. And I started challenging these 2 police officers. I was like, hang on, mate. No. Why are you here, mate? Are you trying to intimidate me or something to stop doing what I'm doing? And I just started putting it back. I'm very respectful when I speak, but I'm not going to take their bullshit. And after that, then I started getting a little bit more trouble and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it was a very difficult year, and my wife was freaking out that they were my wife's Russian. I met my wife in Clear Cafe in Ubud. I was working online. She was working online. I turned to my neighbor and, her, and I said, excuse me, is your internet working? Because unfortunately the internet stopped. And she's like, oh, I don't speak English. I'm like, cool. Google Translate. Does your internet work? No. Long story short, 5 hours of connection. My wife and I are now, married for the last 5 years. We have a 5-year-old son who was born in St. Petersburg. So all of a sudden I met a Russian, fell in love with a Russian. I didn't care where my wife was going to be from. She could have been Chinese or from Mars. She turned out to be Russian, and they're very beautiful people. The Russians are very, very beautiful people, deeply spiritual, very deeply spiritual. And so I met my wife there. We moved to St. Petersburg. Our son was born in St. Petersburg. We moved back to Australia, got a residency. We're living there, planned to live there, get her citizenship. But during the COVID thing, they were threatening to lock the borders, that you couldn't travel without a vaccine. And there's no way in hell I'm going to get that vaccine. If you want to get a vaccine, go for it. But, there's no way in hell I'm going to get that vaccine. So my wife was freaking out that she wouldn't be able to see her family. And she was putting a lot of pressure on me, like, I want to go back to Russia. I want to go back to Russia. There was no lockdowns in Russia, completely open. unlike Australia, lockdown, fear porn on the media, vaccine push like crazy. Only like 50% of the population of Russia got the vaccine, and you could buy a certificate black market, and they reckon only probably about 20% of people actually got the vaccine. Most of the people did not. Some people bought it, Some people bought it. I won't go too far into that. It's just in case you needed it, but you didn't need it. So it was really open. So anyway, at the end of this, by the time I got the $3,000 fine threatened, I'd lost enough money on this project. 1 to 10, the odds were stacked against me. And I looked at the landscape of Australia, and I'm like, I think Australia's fallen. I really think Australia's fallen. There's going to be pockets of resistance, but in effect, I don't think that Australia's going to come through this very, very well. I still think the same, Australia and New Zealand, probably Canada as well. And my wife was freaking out, like they're going to lock the borders. Can we please leave? And sort of broken, I said, let's go. We're out of here. Within 4 weeks, we sold everything. 2 cars, house full of furniture, all of our stuff. We literally booked flights 4 weeks out. I had a house that I had to break the lease. I had a 20-year lease for the commercial property that I had to break the lease, find tenants for the both. Sold 2 cars, sold all the furniture within 4 weeks, fire sailed the lot, got on a plane, flew from Gold Coast to Sydney, Sydney to Tokyo, one night in Tokyo airport, Tokyo to Russia, no mask. I fought the whole way. I had so many arguments. We were the only people on the planes to not wear masks. No bullshit. No, not going to play your game, guys. Flew to Moscow, landed in Moscow. That was 2 years ago next month. No, it's April already, this month. 2 years ago we've been here. And then the journey being here has been just a restart. We knew that we wanted to live in an eco-village. That was part of the permacare movement. But how I got here to this eco-village is, again, I see this as our future. We have to live in community. We have to come together. You guys have a thriving digital community, which is fantastic and absolutely necessary. We're given this technology to come together for a reason. I too have a thriving, you guys saw some of my videos, a thriving digital community, right? Just before this, I was having a coaching call and I get to connect with people all over the world. But to me, a physical community is essential for what we're going through and what is about to come with the collapse of the US dollar and, potentially whatever is going to be the ripple effects of that. So we were looking for an eco-village. We, through a friend of a friend, got introduced to the Ringing Cedars communities. And I don't know how much you guys know about them, but the books were written in 1995, and it sparked a movement, global now, but across Russia. There are thousands of eco-villages across Russia, thousands. Some of them have 10 people. We looked at one of the communities, which is not far from here. I think they had 20 families, something like that, spread out. Everyone in the Anastasia village has a hectare of land. That's sort of like the minimum amount, which is 2.5 acres, give or take. You have to have a pond, right? So everyone digs a pond. Have your own water supply, which is really important. We have a pond, we have a well, and we have a bore. So we have 3 water supplies, and we're on the creek, which is flowing nicely now with the spring melt. So water is really important, and it's all about growing food and raising families. Who's read at least the first Anastasia book? So what I'd encourage, if you are interested in this way of life, is just go and read the first book. There's 9 of them, right? And you don't have to read all 9 of them, but if you at least read the first book, it will give you the philosophy. And we came into it the other way around. So we were like, we want to live in community. We want to grow food. We want to raise our family. We have our son is nearly 5. We're calling in our daughter now. When she's ready, she will come. We would like to have one more. But we just want to grow food. We want to raise a beautiful family. And we want to do it in a community of people that have the same values. So we started looking for this. Friend of a friend introduced us to the Ringing Cedars. We went and had a look at another community. There's actually a website and a map, and you can look at all of the different communities and see who's in there. And he said, no, you've got to come and meet this Dobre Zemla. Dobre Zemla is kind land in Russian. So we came, and they have we have, geez, I'm living here now. The last 6 weeks, our house got finished 6 weeks ago. We moved in. We've been building for the last 12 months. We bought the land here 18 months ago. And we came here, and there's a community center. where they run music events, like classical music, kids events. They built like an outdoor play area, an outdoor auditorium where they host like events and stuff during summer. Beautiful big hall inside. And we came to this event and instantly we were both like, this is it. We want to live here. There's a school, there's a kindergarten, all inside this community. This was one of the original Anastasia eco-villages. It's about 3 hours from Moscow. Vladimir Megre, who wrote the books, he has land here, although he now lives in Germany, but he's got land here. So like this is one of the originals. It's 18 years now it's been established. There's 300 families that live here, 200 permanent families. And you imagine everyone's got a hectare of land. And there's land, like there's a lot of land and forests. It actually encompasses 3 traditional villages. Russia is very traditional. A lot of people still live in traditional villages. And then around that, the community, have bought up the old farmland and then subdivided the farmland into 1 hectare lots. And then the founders here have put in roads, put in electricity, petitioned the council to put in electricity and whatever. Yeah, so 200 permanent families, the school, the whatever else, and then 100 families that come in the summer. They maybe live in the cities. So to understand a little bit about Russia, the communist times, everyone got given accommodation from the factory that you worked at. And so everyone sort of lives in towns or cities, mostly in apartments. So they all got given an apartment, and then they would have what they call a dacha. It's written about in the books. For anyone that's read the books, Anastasia talks about the Dachniks. And the dacha is that place where you go, it's like your country house, right? But for the Russians, growing food is absolutely necessary. They're very agricultural. They're very, very connected to the land. So everywhere you go, even outside of the eco-village, like all of the traditional villages, everybody grows food. There's nobody mowing the lawn in Russia. I have never seen anybody. I've lived here for 2 years and I lived in St. Petersburg for a year. So 3 years I've lived in Russia. Nobody has a lawn. They have gardens, epic gardens, and they're just growing lots and lots of food. So they live in the city and then they have the dacha where they go and grow their food. So that's already amongst the culture. When Anastasia, is how we say it in Russian, Anastasia shared this philosophy, it was already so close to home for the Russian people, it wasn't a big step outside of their existing consciousness. So to then go and start to just live in intentional communities, it was like the traditional villages that a lot of their grandparents, per se, were living in already. And it was like the dacha. Every spring you go to the dacha and you start growing your food. You plant in the greenhouses. All summer, the growing season here is amazing, right? The stuff just jumps out of the ground. So all summer you grow food and then you preserve it in autumn and then you live on that over the winter, right? That was just a normal way of life. And so when Anastasia starts talking about like, this is the future, this is how we can live, raise families, live close to the land, grow your own food, so many Russians are just like, hallelujah, this is exactly how we want to live. And again, it's taken off in other places around the world. There is hundreds of eco-villages around the world, but there's thousands and tens of thousands of people in Russia living this way. So for us, when we found this movement, we got introduced to a different. We wanted to find an eco-village. We found the eco-village, and then they said, hey, read the book. And I was like, oh, what's the book? I'd heard about the book. Who's heard about the ringing cedars before this conversation? Most of us, right? Like it's sort of going around. So a lot of people had talked to me about that. Obviously, my wife's Russian. So they'd be like, oh, Russian, have you read the ringing cedars? I was like, no, I never heard of it. And then finally, we found the eco-village. We bought the land. And then I'm like, I better go read these books. So then I started reading the books. And when I read the first book, I was just like, man, this is us. Everything she spoke about was already how I was living my life, the philosophy that I carried. And I didn't even know that there was this massive movement of people already doing it. So we got like welcomed in to not only the family of 300 families here, but also this global movement. And especially across Russia, like we can go to any eco-village now and be like, hey, yeah, we live in Dobre Zemla. Oh, no, cool, come be part of it. We can get on and chat with people. So it's a beautiful mood. It's like the Tribes United, that vision that I have, right? Like there's this connection of these eco-villages. And effectively, yeah, here it's just about living close to the land. As I said, growing food is a really big part of it. I love growing food. The only real job I've had in my whole adult life was for 2 years. I worked as a landscape gardener. Other than that, I was adventure guiding, and then I've been in the thought leader space. And I just wanted to learn how to grow food. I just love growing food. So for me, that's a big part of it. And then it's just about being part of the community. Like, I'm about to start teaching English lessons at the school at Dobro Zimla. I do an acrobatics class with my son, my 5-year-old, at the hall. The concerts we go to every month or whenever they're on, we get to go to those. So it's just about being an active participant in the community, raising our kids, hopefully one more to come, in an environment where there's a lot of love and nurture. And I just feel really grateful that this is a reality outside of the woke culture of the West. Unfortunately, I just feel that the West is, in a downward spiral. Again, there's pockets like ours right here in this conversation that are rising up, but the culture as a whole, I think, is very poisoned. I believe that Russia is standing against that. From what I listened to from President Putin, who I'm a big fan of, I've studied a lot of the man's work in his history and the work that the words that he's speaking today, and I admire the man. I believe that he has a heart for the people, and he's doing everything he can to protect the traditional values, and in this country, it's the Christian values. But regardless of what the religion is, they're just traditional, homegrown family values. And I feel that I'm standing, behind the wall of Putin's strength and courage. And I'm grateful to be able to raise my family in this environment. And I just want to be a blessing on people. I just want to be a blessing on those that I meet. That's why I'm here at 9:30 at night talking with you guys. Like, I just want to be part of this awakening, again, because I believe that we are in a collective awakening. And I feel that being here in this eco village is the best way to do that. And then share this message with other people and say, like, even if you can't live in an eco village, maybe you live in a normal village, but find people like you. Find people that you can, she'll grow tomatoes and you grow the cucumbers, and you can barter with each other. You can trade with each other. There's young families out there. Find 3 mums, 5 mums that are at home with the kids and say, how about you take the kids on Wednesday, you take the kids on Thursday, and that'll give me a break and I'll take them on the Tuesday. Perfect. Creating community is essential for our thriving future. Well, thank you guys so much. After that, I actually went on and spent another hour with the Connecting Consciousness community answering their questions. They did ask me to not film that section because lots of members that, didn't want to be public. But yeah, I hope you got a lot out of that conversation. So that was my story. Now you understand who is this guy, Scotty Ze, a bit deeper than just like the bio. And, hopefully I inspired you a little bit about that story to live your life a little bit more free and just be yourself, because that's all I'm doing. I'm just being myself. Love me or leave me. That's pretty much how it is. I'm just being me. I just want to love the world and people and be a blessing on everybody that I meet. And hopefully, hearing my story now, it's connected you and I a little bit deeper. And as always, please, if this resonates with you, share this with somebody that you love. Share it on your social media. Send this episode to somebody and say, you got to come and be part of the Tribes United, because this movement is real. Do us a big favor and share that out with the people that you love. Head over to scottyz.com to grab all the show notes to learn about Connecting Consciousness, that movement, this spiritual movement that I was a part of. And I'll also put in the show notes here, if you go and search at Scotty Ze, Ringing Cedars, you can get information about the Ringing Cedars Eco Village that I live in, and this movement around the world of the Ringing Cedars movement that has come from Russia. So scottyz.com, head over there. And otherwise, love you so much. Share this with someone you love, and we'll see you on the next episode. Cheers.